note for the record, Alderman Savage and Alderman Arnett are present and accounted for. First item is approval of the minutes from the December 10th meeting.
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Second?
Okay. Further discussion?
Isn't the first item actually approval of the agenda?
Did I just skip that? I did go right on down.
I'll move to approve the agenda.
So move to approve the agenda. Is there a second?
I would like to remove 03419 from the agenda. It's not timely. That's the one I'm going to be meeting with the chair of the Board of Appeals with. And I don't even like the title of the ordinance, so we're going to have to do some major rewrite.
Okay, so you want to remove 03419 from the agenda?
Correct.
Is there a second to do that?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Okay, we're approving the agenda. Do we need to vote on that removal? Okay, I thought so. All in favor of removing 03419 from the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And so can I get a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
A second.
Okay, discussion, hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 The agenda has been approved. Now we'll approve the minutes from the December meeting.
So I seconded. Pardon? Yeah, we did it.
Oh, I thought we
Out
went
of
back.
order.
Quick.
And, okay, seconded, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Sorry, aye.
Okay, first item under legislation is 02019, dwellings above the ground floor of non-residential uses in the B1 Convenient Shopping District and B2 Community Shopping District.
So
Dr. Nash, welcome.
this is legislation that was drafted really quite a while ago at the beginning of the deliberations on the Eastport Shopping Center. And it had to do with concerns that I had about the ability to develop residential space over parking lots, commercial parking lots. And I will tell you in a second, I met with Dr. Nash and Tom Smith last week. Was it last week, Sally? Here's what I was concerned about. This is the Growls Shopping Center.
We're
This
gonna
is their whole lot.
put that in the record.
Yeah, right. And I think under the code, you could put an apartment building above ground with only its support columns, stairways, and elevators, because the parking lot in code is ancillary to commercial buildings. So as I interpreted the code at the time, and I still think that interpretation of the code is correct, but Sally and Tom, and we'll let Sally speak for herself, said, yeah, but you couldn't really do this because the site design criteria would not allow it. So, ta-da!
And Sally, are you familiar with the diagram here? It's just showing.
Is it similar to the one he drew last week? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and that's right. I think that aesthetically, we wouldn't want a building like that just from how it looked from the street. We would want to activate the street front with actual building and hopefully a retail use on a multi-floor kind of building.
But what if they put a nice fancy brick wall around the first floor? Could be made out of blocks of gold. I mean, whatever. I know that's not, but I mean, can they fancy up something like this? The yellow is my concept of the apartment building supports and elevator and stairs.
Right.
I mean, I'm willing to withdraw the legislation based on your opinion that it is really not going to be a problem. It couldn't happen. But that was a concern. And it is a concern because of my understanding that MRE Capital is looking to do a lot of development, particularly in Ward 2, where they want to put a lot of apartments over commercial space. So I just want to be clear that now the reaction from the Planning Commission was quite negative to this. It was, why do you not want to have parking for apartment buildings. You know, what are you, a communist? I mean, it was strong that they thought that this was, and I did not do a good. I wasn't prepared to really explain what I was thinking. But be that as it may, if you look at the Planning Commission report, they're recommending against this legislation. I'm willing to let Sally continue to speak instead of jumping in while she was talking. And
you've pretty much captured it all. I mean, their Planning Commission's concern, and that's our concern as well in the department, is that this would limit our flexibility in terms of design review. And there might be a situation where it would be appropriate to have parking in a situation like that if they had a certain kind of facade that made it aesthetically acceptable. We wouldn't want to say under no circumstances can you do this when there might be a design solution that would accommodate that.
And in fact, the Eastport Shopping Center does have structured parking on the Chesapeake Avenue level and lower down on the can never remember
Norman
Street level, and it is covered over with a brick facade, so you don't really see, other than the entrances, you don't really see that it's a garage.
Well, may I go ahead? The town center, Target, that's parking on one level, the store is on another level.
Mm-hmm.
So does this legislation stop that kind of development? Okay. And I think in other areas of the town center where the condos are, whether they're the condos or the rental apartments, I think there's parking on another level in the same building. It may be just adjacent to, I don't know.
Some of the condos have lobbies, but I think there is one, Crosswinds, or one of them has parking and then condos above the parking.
So
Well,
this-
no, except they have the retail facade with like Paladar. They have a retail facade on almost all the buildings, I believe.
Okay, but this legislation would disallow, like the Target style.
Right, it'd have to be retail all the way through on the first floor. You couldn't just have a retail use as the facade use and then parking deeper in the structure like a Target.
Oh, okay.
So that is an interesting distinction, though, and I have to admit the thought that was behind this was where there was already existing B1 or B2 commercial. What you're talking about is where it's new construction altogether. The illustration for
Target probably was a parking lot before, but
well, yeah, it was the old
the old
PG&E
shopping center.
But when you look at the illustration in the zoning code for residential above commercial, it looks very much like Main Street. You know, where you have retail on the first floor and you have the two floors, which I enthusiastically applaud. That's not new construction, that's existing. But be that as may, I'll leave it to you. I'm more than happy to withdraw this if you think it's, I mean, that's the advice of the staff, is to withdraw.
Alderman?
Yeah, so thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I'd be in support of withdrawing. It just, I did have a question about what precipitated this, and I think you've answered some of that. But I also don't want to limit staff in the site design review. I know we have we have one building under construction in Ward 7, and then another one that two new developments part of the Bay Village that I think both of them would utilize this to a certain degree to try to limit the footprint to protect more forest and address stormwater concerns. So I do think there's a valid use for this type, and I want to, if there are specific areas that you feel this would not be appropriate, I'm certainly open to considering that. But I think as written, it might be a little too broad of an
I think it's
approach.
an esoteric piece of legislation. I would have to go back and rewrite it and make it clear that This is for existing developments and all of that, and I'm more than happy to, I'm not happy, but I will withdraw it at the advice of the staff and the committee. So
Okay.
I will notify the Office of Law to withdraw this piece of legislation.
Okay, and I believe Takia has, Ms. Green has it, put it in the record that that legislation will be withdrawn. Okay, then that takes us to 02819, Tattoo Parlor. Dr. Nash, are you speaking to this one also?
Yes, good evening. This ordinance 02819 takes what is currently grouped into a category called personal care establishments, is how we, which is where we place tattoo parlors currently, and separates it out from that use and specifies that it is would only be allowed in BCE and MX zoning districts. The Planning Commission heard this ordinance at their last meeting, but hasn't adopted their findings yet. However, they did vote to not recommend the ordinance.
Okay.
I can't remember why.
Do we want to wait till we get their findings?
Pardon me?
Do we want to wait till we get their findings? That would
I would think so.
be helpful for me
Always wanna
anyway.
wait till we get the Planning Commission.
And I kind of like to know, maybe Dr. Nash could help, but would this impact Ward 7 at all? Do we have any of that zoning?
It would make it so there would be no tattoo parlors allowed in Ward 7.
And there are currently allowed.
There aren't any now, but they are allowed.
And that's because we have which zoning?
They currently are allowed in almost all of the MX districts, as well as all of the business districts.
Oh, so this legislation would restrict it to only allowing
MX.
2.
And BCE, which are
Zoning.
Inner and Upper West Street.
So it
Okay.
would only allow the, in BCE and MX.
Right,
I'm a
so
little-
they would only be allowed in Inner and Upper West Street.
I'm a little uncomfortable. I mean, I thought it was just restricted to downtown, but you know, I don't really want to restrict it in my ward without. I've certainly had no requests to do that. Anyway, it's my.
Well, so this would disallow tattoo parlors
That's
in
right.
any place other than BCE and MX zones.
Correct.
And where's BCE?
Upper West Street,
Upper West Street. Where's MX? MX?
Inner West Street.
Inner West Street?
And there's one block in the historic district. With the Planning Commission's findings, I will also include a letter from Robert Clark, who wrote to support the ordinance. And he describes tattoo parlors as detrimental to the historic district.
That they would only be allowed on West Street, you're saying?
There would be one block of the historic district which is MX, so they would be allowed, but not in any other areas of the historic district.
So we're going from, they're currently allowed all around the city, but we would be limited to only West Street essentially.
Correct.
Well, I wonder what Alderwoman Pindell Charles thinks about this, because she's BCE, right? And who's
MX is mostly Alderwoman Tierney and Fred Paone a little bit.
and I think I have a tiny bit.
You might have a sliver, yeah.
So we're restricting it from all over the city to this West Street corridor, in other words. And the Planning Commission opposed this legislation, you said?
Yes, they thought the regulations should stay as they are.
Which means they're allowed anywhere in the city,
But as a
In
subset.
most business districts.
in the business district. That's interesting. And their justification for not narrowing the location?
They didn't think it was a problem that needed to be solved.
Okay. Alderman?
Well, so it seems to me like we need to defer until we get the planning commission, but also I think we need to invite the other affected aldermen in, Ellie's legislation, but I'd certainly want to hear from Rhonda on this too, and it does affect you.
Sounds like it impacts everybody.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I'm old school. I tend to associate tattoo parlors with the section down where all the Navy guys hang out as they get off ships and get all doctored up. But
Tattoos have come a long way.
they've certainly gotten a lot more.
comments from this side of the
And Alderman Arnett, that was along the lines of Robert Clark's concerns.
Yeah.
Well, I'm comfortable, if you guys are, with postponing action.
And
Miss-
inviting the affected alderpersons
Right.
to.
Ms. Takia, is there a time sensitivity to this?
No, and I believe you got. I believe that you did take action on it at a council meeting and to postpone it, but that it would be allowed to stay in committee. So that's why it's back on your agenda.
Okay,
It had a public hearing recently.
Yeah,
I don't think anyone testified.
No.
yeah, I don't.
they didn't.
Okay, so let's postpone action until the next meeting.
Okay.
And hopefully, by that time, we'll have the written opinion from the planning commission.
They should have
And
their
we'll be able to
findings
invite the
in the
colleagues.
February meeting, so their findings should be ready.
What's the date of our February meeting? I hope it's not the 18th.
Good question.
The 11th, okay. Question?
Nope. I move that we postpone.
Second?
Second.
All in favor of postponing 028? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. And I think that exhausts our agenda.
Yes.
Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
To adjourn. Second.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you much. Thank you, Dr. Nash.
I had no idea.